24th of February 2021, I parked my camper van outside Scottish Parliament to protest COVID. I approached the security, informed them of what I was doing, and then parked my van in a disabled parking spot outside the front of Parliament. At 10 a.m, the police approached me and informed me that I could not park there. I highlighted that it is a matter for the council and not a matter for them, and that I was protesting COVID within my rights. They repeatedly informed me that if I did not move there would be consequences. Unbeknown to me, my MOT had expired a few days before. At 11:30 a.m, they charged me for driving a vehicle without an MOT. It was a stupid oversight from my part. However, now that I'd been charged for not having an MOT, it was definitely illegal for me to move the vehicle unless I had a booked MOT. I spent the rest of the day trying to book an MOT, but for a Class 5 vehicle, that's actually more difficult than you'd think. The officers spent the rest of the day coming forwards and backwards asking me to leave, with various consequences in mind. I refused at every turn, reminding the officers that it was illegal for me to drive the vehicle until I had a booked MOT, in which case I would drive it straight to that garage. Then, at 6 p.m, the officer came back and informed me that I was being arrested for comments made on the 15th of February. I had no idea what he was talking about, and when I asked him what the comments were, he had no idea either. He got back onto the phone to the person who gave him the order to arrest me and asked him, and then returned to me and informed me that he had been told that I had threatened to ram the gates of Parliament with my van. Evidently, I had just spent the last 8 hours not ramming the gates of Parliament with my van. Additionally, there are various counter-terror obstacles in place, such as bollards, to ensure no vehicle can get near the entrance, so I considered it all a little bit suspicious and refused to exit my vehicle. They broke into my vehicle, detained me, and then I was transferred to a mental health hospital. The detention paperwork said that I had blocked the entrance of Parliament for 48 hours. It was also described as a blockade in other aspects of the paperwork. There was also a variety of misrepresentations designed to exaggerate the situation. The lie originated from an organisation called FTAC, who were requesting that I be heavily medicated. It's unusual for the police to correct themselves when they make a mistake. However, professional standards at Police Scotland did clarify the information was incorrect and that they don't know how it got onto their systems. I also note that they referred to me as a victim, a curious choice of words. All doctors involved in the incident refused to give statements, but did mention that they did receive intelligence from another source suggesting that an entity that wasn't the police was involved, and relayed information. My doctor often bragged about receiving a letter from Buckingham Palace, which was from FTAC. He stated regularly that they wanted me to be contained and that he was the man that was going to do it. He stated that they had instructed him to medicate me. He stated that if I did not consent to oral medication voluntarily, he would inject me by force. And in order to try and convince me to take it orally, he stated that I was not allowed to leave the facility and that I should remain locked in with heavily reduced freedoms. As a smoker, I found the nicotine withdrawal to be the worst part, but I'm also not the kind of man that does well when he's locked in a box without consent. After a few weeks of the containment, I gave in to the pressure and decided to take the medication orally. As promised, I was permitted to go outdoors the next day. While out with a walking group, I started to develop symptoms of side effects of the medication. I began to lean back quite severely to the point that I could not stand up and walk. I was struggling to breathe and my muscles began to tighten around my face and neck, locking my head over to one side. As the symptoms worsened, I was afraid for my life. If I focused on relaxing and on breathing exercises, I managed to lessen the symptoms, but they were still very severe. An ambulance had to be called and I was taken to A&E. I was accompanied by one of the nurses from the ward who didn't like me. Despite the difficulty in speaking and breathing, she made me answer all of the questions that the A&E nurse was asking, even though she knew the answers herself. I was taken back to the ward in a wheelchair, and then taken to bed, where I slept it off and I was fine the next day. The other nurse that attended was one of the good eggs. She didn't accompany me to A&E, however she was on the ward when I got back. As I laid in bed, I heard her arguing with other nurses. Although I couldn't hear the other nurses, I'm assuming it was the other nurse that accompanied me to A&E. I remember her shouting that she hadn't worked that hard to get her nursing qualification, just to lose it over this. I suspect this is because the other nurse was lying about the incident. You can see in this note that they suggest the ambulance didn't find any issues, but the reality is that I needed assistance to get into the ambulance, and a wheelchair to get out. These notes were not made by the ambulance crew, they were made by the mental health staff on the ward. 2 members of staff even suggested that I was making the symptoms up after copying them off another patient, but no patients had presented with these symptoms while I was there. They formalised it though as a possible anxiety attack, which is absolutely ridiculous. The reality is that it's called dystonia, and it is a known side effect of antipsychotic drugs. The episode I had was very severe. Regardless, the doctor was very clear that he insisted that I must take the medication no matter what, and he informed me that after my tribunal, which he would ensure I lose, he would be injecting me with a much more intense version that would render me completely unconscious and ensure that I walk with a limp. The tribunal is to ensure that the mental health detention is legal, and a crucial piece of criteria in order to detain someone under the Mental Health Act is that they must serve a severe risk to themselves or somebody else. If they don't, you can't detain them. So take a listen to this.
And I think I need to put it to you that the test is actually is a significant risk. There would be a significant risk to others if Mr. Battye were not to continue to be detained in hospital. But I just want to be clear what your bottom line is on that test, risk to others, risk to the safety of others.
Yes, I do not think that Mr. Battye poses a significant risk of safety to other people.
And just like that, the criteria to detain me is not met. Therefore, I should be released. But listen to this bit.
Doctor, how independent is my client with his self-care, and has that changed at any point during this admission?
Mr. Battye is independent with his self-care.
And has that ever been a concern?
No.
Doctor, is my client currently receiving any passes from the ward, and if you can address whether or not any COVID restrictions are playing a part in that?
Mr. Battye is not receiving any passes from the ward. This is not entirely because of COVID restrictions. Further to Mr. Battye needing an ambulance and being taken to accident and emergency when out with the working group, staff have been concerned that he might not do as he's asked if they were out walking with him. So Mr. Battye has no passes from the ward at the moment.
Has Mr. Battye made any attempt to leave the ward, either by absconding or simply just walking out?
No, Mr. Battye has not.
So that's a lot of words. Let me break it down a little bit for you. They have no concerns about my ability to look after myself, and I've made no effort to run away, even though I was under a lot of pressure. And the doctor's reasoning for not giving me any time off the ward, well, that just doesn't add up, does it? So in reality, it is not appropriate to detain me under the Mental Health Act. So why would they do it? The simple truth is that they can use the Mental Health Act to force very powerful medication into me, against my will. But don't take my word for it. Here's the doctor saying it for himself.
But it's medical treatment that we need the authority of the Mental Health Act to assert.
And he's doing it at the request of
The Fixated Threat Assessment Centre at Buckingham Palace. In fact, they emailed me in the last couple of days.
But if I tell anybody that, it's a delusion, right? Of course not, because you heard that too. He wasn't the first doctor that they've tried to coerce into forcing very powerful drugs into me that would hamper my cognitive abilities. And though I'm sure you agree this is a very serious and painful experience for me, they do a lot worse in part 5. So make sure you watch that video. However, during this detainment, they also accused me of being racist when I was discussing a book called The Chimp Paradox with another patient. They said I'm not allowed to use the term chimp because apparently it's racist, even though our discussion had nothing to do with ethnicity. That same nurse also lied in the paperwork and claimed that there was a black nurse on service that day who took offence, and there just wasn't. The doctor also informed that it would help me get my van back because the police had arranged for it to be crushed, even though it was my home, and he just sat on his hands. One nurse came up to me and asked me if it was true that I had chained myself to the fence, which obviously it was not. And after I posted a video on the internet of the symptoms that I had after I took the antipsychotic, and to stop me recording the MDT meetings where the doctor was threatening me with the injection and ransoming my freedom to try and force me to take oral medication, they took my phone off me, claiming that I had been recording other patients inappropriately, which I hadn't. After losing the tribunal, I was very upset and I was expecting to be injected. The idea of being pinned to the floor while someone sticks something sharp into my bum didn't really sound very pleasant. I considered my options and decided to take the oral medication to avoid that. The medication rendered me pretty much paralysed on my bed. I spent much of the night in pain because my elbow was digging into my ribs, but I didn't have the energy or strength to move it. Thankfully, the nurses had kicked up enough of a fuss for me, and the next morning I had a replacement doctor. The difference in the two doctors was astounding. The new doctor couldn't see any psychotic symptoms in me at all. She helped me get my van back within a couple of days, luckily just before it was crushed. And she let me go outside without the condition of having to take medication. I spent about a week in her care under the Mental Health Act before she released me from it but asked me to stay voluntarily, so she could be sure that I wasn't unwell, and I agreed. 3 weeks after that, she released me, and we arranged follow-up appointments for a month or two later. Just before the appointments, I called up to make sure it was still going ahead and asked to speak to her, but the receptionist informed me that she had gone into urgent retirement. I found it very hard to believe that this good doctor just decided to pack her bags and leave and retire without notifying any of her patients. And even to this day, I struggle to find reasons why anybody would urgently retire. I was transferred back into the care of the doctor who had caused me so much harm, so I refused to go to any follow-up appointments after that. And then the hospital claimed that no follow-up appointments had been arranged at all, which is another lie. And just like that, a good doctor did the right thing and lost her job, while the bad doctors remain the primary carers for mental health patients in those facilities. I submitted complaints to the NHS. However, they were unwilling to investigate or respond appropriately and were very eager to close them without carrying out any action to ensure these things don't happen again. And what I discovered about the treatment of mental health patients in the United Kingdom during this incident truly horrified me.